This program was sponsored by the Jesse and John Dance Fund. Since 1962, these lectures have been a forum for distinguished scholars of national and international reputation who have concerned themselves with the impact of science and philosophy on man's perception of a rational universe.
My name is Marcia Landel. I'm the Dean of the Graduate School at the University of Washington. And on behalf of the Graduate School and the University, it's my distinct honor to be with you this evening. The visiting professorship program that we're participating in tonight was created in 1961 with a bequest from the estate of Mr. John Dance. Mr. John Dance came to Seattle in the early days of this century and became a very successful businessman. Mr. Dance was a well-educated or a self-educated man who read widely and liberally. He was a person who was fascinated by scientific developments and was particularly interested in the philosophy of humanism. In creating this professorship, his goal was to bring distinguished lecturers and scholars of international reputation to the University of Washington. He particularly wanted to bring men and women, and this is a quote, who have concerned themselves with the impact of science and philosophy on man's perception of a rational universe. Mr. Dan's wife, Jessie, shared this vision and augmented the endowment with additional gifts until the time of her death. I believe there are members of the Dan's family who are here with us this evening, and I hope you will join me in thanking the Dan's family for this very generous gift. We are absolutely delighted to have Professor Vine Deloria as our speaker this evening. To honor his presence, the First Nations at UW singers will sing two songs for us this evening. The first is an honor song for Professor Deloria, and the second is a veteran song that is offered as a prayer for all soldiers in past and present wars. Please welcome the First Nation singers.
My name is Paulette Jordan, and we are here as representatives of First Nations at the University of Washington. We have a special guest with us tonight, and he's a very dear friend of ours and the community within Seattle, and actually throughout the Northwest. His name is Arlie Neskahai, and he's going to be singing two very special songs. And we're all here to honor Vine Deloria because we're very, like I said, blessed to be here with him today and to hear what he has to say. And as like I said, special fans of his books. I myself am a special fan of his, and I've read everything that he's wrote, and I'm just excited to hear what he has to say tonight. But again, I'd like to introduce Arlie Neskahai and invite him to the mic. Thank you.
Thank you, Paulette. It's one of the greatest honors in my life to come and sing this evening. And when Paulette called me this afternoon and asked me, kind of shook me to my knees. Because it was during the 1970s when I was in a university place like this that I began to hear the words of these people, Vine Deloria, one of them, and others who began to speak in a real bold way. And at that time, it seemed like a lot of the people around were just kind of wondering, what are we going to do now? What direction? Where do we go? And it was these voices that came out in the 70s that really inspired me. And as a student in university, to hear these words and to read these words, the readings of Vine Deloria and others, was a great inspiration to me. And I stand here today as a Native person, the things that I've gone through and the accomplishments because of persons like him. So it's a great honor that I sing tonight. I was asked to sing two songs. And when I was first learning to sing, the elder singers told me that these good songs to learn are the veteran songs. And they instructed me to school myself in them. And so in that tradition, they said that these songs are to be sung. And so I'm going to sing the veteran song first. And I want to share with you a beautiful song that was given to me by a singer from North Dakota. His name's Danny Seaboy. And this song, he said, he made to honor all the warriors that have crossed over the seas and have given their lives. And it says this song is beautiful, and that way he wanted from his heart to express the feelings of the people. And the way this song goes, it says, there are many wars and many battles, and I have traveled over to them. And I traveled to this battle, and it was very difficult. And my buddy, my comrade, in the way he says it, he said, my comrade, he gave his life, and he fell on foreign land. And he said that we did this because we love our country. The last part, it says, Makoche, Tewa Chinacha. It says we do this because we love our country, we love our home. So this is the first song I'd like to sing, and after that, then an honor song for Mr. Deloria. Yeah! Very beautiful song. Honor song.
Thank you, First Nations. My name is Tom Colonies. I'm the Chair of American Indian Studies at the University of Washington. For the past 500 years, war has been waged against Native peoples of the Americas. Native Americans have consistently been portrayed in belittling and demeaning characterizations. Given that the basic humanity of Native people has so often been disregarded, it is not altogether shocking that Native American perspectives and bodies of knowledge have rarely been acknowledged or studied. But in refusing to hear Native voices, Americans have not only rejected their fellow citizens, they have also failed to hear wise voices, especially at a time when wise voices seem to be truly rare. Over the past 3 decades, Vine Deloria Jr., Lakota Sioux, is a voice that has insisted on being heard. He is the author of nearly 24 books, including God is Red, Custard Died for Your Sins, Red Earth, White Lies, and his most recent, Evolution, Creationism, and Other Modern Myths. In each of his works, Professor Deloria has explored Native American issues and perspectives on topics that include political and treaty rights, religion and social forces, and the traditional knowledge of First Nations people. In each of his works, he has been a unique, an innovative, and often a controversial voice. His studies have time and again revealed that the foundations of some of our most sacred intellectual edifices are indeed quite flimsy. I would not be surprised if Professor Deloria rocked some of those constructs a bit this evening. The title of Professor Deloria's lecture is The World We Used to Live In. It is an honor to introduce Professor Vine Deloria Jr.
You should have saved that applause till you heard what I was going to say. I'd like to thank the Dan's Committee for inviting me here. Years ago, before most of you were born, I was up at Western Washington and in Bellingham there 2 years. And came down to the U quite a bit. And I was working with Billy Jack down at Frank's Landing on the fishing. So I'm no stranger here, although a lot of you are too young to remember the last time I was here. So, I'd like to thank the singers for those songs, and it's very nice to be recognized in that way. I'd also like to present to the audience a little bit of my current outrage, which is that we have 300,000 servicemen over the Middle East, and any one of them can be badly injured today as we're doing this lecture. And Congress is cutting veterans' benefits. See, now if that doesn't totally outrage you, then you're not a human being. And we're sending young people over there to get blown to bits. And when they come back here disabled, they're going to have less than any returning veterans have ever had. That's absolutely insane. Totally insane. And it is approved by a moron who couldn't even attend National Guard meetings. Now, a few comments and then I'll get into my speech, hopefully. I'd like to applaud and discuss briefly the work of Donald Grayson, who's here a professor on campus. For almost 40 years, we've been fighting with the Paul Martin group over whether Indians came across the Bering Strait and killed all the big animals. And during that time, by private correspondence and frequently word of mouth, I've asked Paul Martin to put up or shut up. Where's the evidence? You don't hold a murder trial if there's no body and nobody's been killed. So I've demanded during this time, tell us how many sites there are, tell us what the evidence is, And of course, there's no evidence. And so finally, Donald Grayson of your university put the whole thing on computer, checked the whole thing out, and boiled down to a very few spots where there might have been, and a couple where there surely were, but not 33 species of animals. So I want to applaud that professor and tell you students, anyone who's getting in on the side of realism, you better take his courses and you better find out what the guy's doing, because he's doing some good stuff. So a round of applause for your professor here. But you ought to reserve a space to ask for what was the world like that we used to live in. See, were conditions so radically changed for previous humans that that field alone constitutes a new field of study? And then I started going through just from what little I knew of history, and I said there's a lot of historical things, incidents, events, etc., that if the public knew, they would change their perception of various parts of what they think is American history. And I'll try out some of them with the audience, just as kind of a give and take. We're often made to believe that the West was totally unsettled until after the Battle of the Little Bighorn. There might have been trappers out there. There might have been mountain men, traders. They were putting through railroads, but they certainly hadn't gotten, other than the Union Pacific, they hadn't gotten very far as of Little Bighorn. But no one can imagine that there were all kinds of white ranchers out there. I mean, it was pretty bleak. So that battle's 1876. In 1855, a Texas cattleman took a herd of over 1,000 head of cattle up the front end of the Rockies, through Wyoming, up to approximately Billings, and then west to Oregon to sell to the settlers. Now, the Oregon Donation Act was only 1850. So 5 years after there's any kind of settlement in Oregon, you got a Texan arriving with all of these cattle. And I said, your average American history book's going to make it seem like there wasn't a white man within 500 miles when the battle took place. And yet, look at what happened there. You also can look at the road between Fort Pierre, South Dakota, what's now South Dakota, and Laramie, Wyoming. And if you go southeast from Fort Pierre, and it was a direct diagonal, you go southwest from Pierre, after a 2-day ride, you would come across the settlement, and this is as of about the 1840s. You come across a settlement, a full ranch, a church, and a graveyard, all kinds of supplies for horses and stages and freighting wagons to go back and forth, so you got a lot of haystacks there and all kinds of wood for repair of wagons. And that was the second day's stop out of Fort Pierre. Now you read the history book, it seemed like there's not a white man in South Dakota, and maybe there wasn't. But what is this settlement doing there in the 1840s? And if you had a cemetery, how long would it take a little settlement to get a cemetery? And so you have to say, well, wait a minute, what is the situation here? Very few people have visited the Black Hills. They were completely off bounds. They found a tablet describing some gold miners who'd gone in about 1836 and apparently all gotten killed. But we get this idea of the frontier, and then we look at all these odd facts of history that you can't get rid of, and then you say, well, wait a minute, settlement was much different. What we're told about the West isn't really the truth. There are all kinds of things yet to be discovered and worked in with the history books. And my favorite one is and I'll hold a quiz for the Indians in the audience. Why do most Plains tribes' names have something to do with bears? Does anyone know? The growling bear and standing bear and sitting bear and whatever. Well, were there any bears out on the Great Plains? And we tend to think of bear as a mountain animal. Let me read from the personal narrative of James Patty, who was a very early trader, went to Santa Fe. We traveled all day up this stream, and he's talking about the Arkansas River. I counted in the course of the day 220 white bears. We killed 8 that made an attack upon us, the claws of which I saved. Now you say, now wait a minute. If you're going from Missouri over to Santa Fe, you hook onto the Arkansas River and you're going to see 200 and some bears a day the rest of the journey? Well, the Great Plains must have been overflowing with bears. See, now how would you know that? You look at some of the Indian tribes, and there's bear, 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 bear. You had to relate to that animal. And I think if you would go to those early reservation census and get the Indian names, you'd say Plains Indians were in close contact with bears and buffalo, because these are the major animals that you find in the names. And consequently, you've got to look at the culture again. See, if these people are dealing with bears every day, they're dealing with healing medicines, they're dealing with prophecies, they're dealing with all kinds of things that we've not attributed. So were these a different kind of people in those days? And you say, well, if you have to relate to those two animals, they may indeed have known things that we don't know any longer. They may have been able to do things that we don't know any longer. Now, in my track for giants, I began to come across references to Pleistocene animals and eventually photos of what appeared to be petroglyphs of dinosaurs. That didn't please the people in Santa Fe, and if I talk about it a little longer, surely I can drive a couple evolutionists out the door. But I'm finding that in this area I'm a little bit like Jesus. Not that I'm holy or anything, but people come to me at night like Nicodemus and hand me treasures and then say, don't mention that I gave it to you. So I would be discredited in the profession, but you're right, and here it is. So suddenly I have thrust on me all kinds of citations about when people saw elephants or the equivalent in colonial days. And the feeling was so prevalent that Jefferson tells Lewis and Clark, as soon as you get out there, you look for the elephants. We want to be sure and get those. So I'd like to read out of the journals, Travels in the Interior of North America, 1851-1862, by Jean-Bernard Bossu. And this is a French gentleman that was up and down the Mississippi, around Louisiana, in contact with the Frenchmen up in the Chicago area. And these are his comments. And this is a letter to the Marquis de Lestrade, 1856. The expedition would have given me the opportunity to examine the place where an Indian found some elephant teeth. He gave me a molar which weighed about 6.5 pounds. In 1735, the Canadians who had come to fight the Chickasaws discovered the skeletons of 7 elephants in the vicinity of the Belle or Ohio River. This leads me to assume that Louisiana is joined to India and that the elephants came here from Asia through the West, which we do not know yet. A herd of these animals must have wandered off on dry land, there's your Bering Strait, and through the forests to this new continent. Since the Indians did not have firearms at the time, they could not have destroyed them all. 7 of them have come all the way to the place I have mentioned, which has been marked with a cross on the map of Louisiana. These elephants evidently came to a swamp into which they sank up to their bellies because of their enormous weight, from which they were unable to extricate themselves. So you get something like that in the mail and you say, wait a minute, you're pushing me to areas that I don't particularly want to go. But then you read about Jefferson saying, go find the elephants. And so I had to add the elephants along with the rest of the thing. In looking through Bousseau, which it seemed to me was pretty grassroots frontier type, I run into this very strange thing, and I'll read this. This is again a letter about 2 weeks later. While I was among the Cahokias, some members of the Osage tribe arrived. Their Manitou was an enormous dried snake, which, according to these Indians, had swallowed an entire wildcat and had done a great deal of damage in their territory. As a result, they set out to kill it and tracked it down. Neither their bullets nor their arrows could penetrate its body, which was covered with very hard scales similar to those of an alligator. They succeeded in killing it, however, by firing bullets and arrows into its eyes. Now, we know the Indian bows and arrows, particularly Plains people, and Osage are qualified for that. They could ride up alongside a buffalo and shoot that arrow, and it would go through the buffalo. Now, what are they talking about with this snake, where you have the same kind of bow, and the scales are so hard that you can't shoot an arrow into them? You've got to hit them in the eye. What kind of creature is this? And is there any record of this? And you see, you've got eyewitness reports from colonial days. And of course, my host at Santa Fe said, when they find these things, why didn't they get it verified by a scientist? 1856, you know, where's the Smithsonian? It's not a glint in anybody's eye at that point. What do? You're out there in southern Illinois, and the Iroquois or Osage Indians bring in a 30-foot creature. You're going to say, wait a minute, we will go to Harvard for a final exam on this. See, and that's why I told the guy in Santa Fe, you know, you're Farmer Brown, you're out there, it's 1816 in Ohio, most of the Indians in the neighborhood hadn't even moved off, and you dig up the skeleton. Now, what is it you're supposed to do with the thing? You can't drop draining the swamp and leveling the mound and making a trip to Harvard and presenting your artifacts to him and then come back. I mean, the science of the day was virtually unorganized. It was the goodwill of the people and their common sense in reporting these things that made this possible. Now, what I've concentrated on thus far is the possible physical changes of animals that might at one time have been on this continent and affected people's lives. I'm not asking you to believe anything. I am simply reporting the material I've been able to gather. If there was such a radical difference, and I think you can demonstrate that once all the petroglyphs of Pleistocene animals are gathered and once all of these early quasi-dinosaurs are gathered. If that was so much different, was the emotional, intellectual, and spiritual life of those people different also? And here was something that I had been wanting to get into for a long time. And so I started looking for instances in which Indians had shown what I would call a talent or a power over and above what the average citizen of today has. In other words, could these medicine men do certain things? Did Indians get messages in non-cause and effect communication sequence? What was life like for those people long ago? And I think in some tribes, you still have people who live in this sense that they're in tune with a whole different set of communicators in the physical world. Now, everybody, almost everybody in the world's read Black Elk Speaks. If you don't get it in an Indian studies course, by the time you get out, you really haven't had Indian studies at all. And a lot of people concentrate on his first vision where he falls sick. The men from the sky come, and it's time to go meet the grandfathers, etc. On page 151, though, for those of you who are going to follow up with smashing essays that are going to be published, Black Elk is out hunting one day, and he runs into a blizzard, and he doesn't know what to do, so he pulls his buffalo robe and wraps up in it. He's going to let the blizzard go by. And he thinks he's all alone out there, that this is it. And he says, the wind went down that night, and it was still and very cold. While I was lying there in a bison robe, a coyote began to howl not far off. And suddenly I knew it was saying something. It was not making words, but it said something plainer than words. And this was it. Two-legged one, on the big ridge west of you there are bison. But first you shall see two more two-legged over there. So you've got a man huddled in a buffalo robe in the middle of a blizzard, and he hears a coyote out of Lord knows where. And the coyote is howling, and this message comes into his mind. Now what happens, he survives the night. He gets up and doesn't know whether to trust this message that he's heard being given. And so he starts to the west to check out see if there are really any buffalo around. And to paraphrase everything, as he's going along, he sees this lump on the ground, and I guess a little steam coming from it, and he goes over. It's an old man and a boy who are also wrapped up in a buffalo robe, and they're starving. They haven't been able to hunt any buffalo. Three of them go over the hill. There are 7 buffalo caught in the heavy drift right in between the hills. They kill some of the buffalo and eat, and everybody's all right. Now, that's a different world than we live in today. We have thousands of religious leaders. In fact, you can go down south and wave the Bible 3 times, you're qualified to interpret it. You go to a Protestant seminary, and if you can accept the fact that all the knots in the 10 Commandments are later interpolations, well, you get ordained there, too. And I don't even want to get into Catholic Church, what you got to do there. We got all these religious people, and yet how many of them could interpret howl of an animal and connect to get this communication and connect and move through things? And there's a great story told by Stanley Vestal, which I really love, which I will read to you. It's very short. This is out of his book Warpath, and those of you who have only read Sitting Bull or White Bull by Vestal, get his whole literature and see. The guy has marvelous short essays on Indians and some on plains warfare. But the background for this is Vestal goes up Standing Rock, which of course myself, and where's the other guy from Standing Rock? Okay, I met one other guy from Standing Rock, and I said, maybe we are holy enough to save this whole group, but you never know. He goes up Standing Rock, and he starts bugging this old man. And he wants to know all this information about this old man. So, this is Vestal. Though the chief had promised to tell me the full story of his life, he was somewhat reluctant to relate this vision and requested that I hear it when there was no one else in the cabin. And there are 3 cabins in a row, and the old man's cabin is the center. He explained that whenever he told it this story, A fierce thunderstorm followed, and therefore he told it very seldom. The old man does not see well and is rather deaf. Now, I kind of dealt with that. I felt close to that thing. He told the story at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. He had been sitting with his back to the north wall of the cabin. Inside, and the sky was cloudless. We finished the conference at 7 o'clock that evening and had supper. By that time, thunderclouds had piled up in the northwest, and my interpreter pointed out certain features of the clouds, which indicated a storm about to break. Immediately after supper, a terrific thunderstorm burst upon us. Now listen to this. The cloud was small and swept out of the north directly for my cabin, where the story had been told. No rain fell on the adjacent cabins with a few yards on either side. And the wind was so strong I had to move my car to keep it from rolling off the bluff. The chief made no comment on this appalling fulfillment of his prediction. He took the storm for granted. Now, what kind of world did these people live in? See, how did that old man know that? If you got 3 cabins in a row and you got a small cloud and it only hits the middle cabin, what the hell are you dealing with here? And when you say this is pre-reservation days, these people are free. You talk to a variety of academics about this, and they'll say, well, it's just coincidence. My response would be, well, why don't you go out and make one of these coincidences happen, and then we'll accept that. But the question is, how was their life different? See? Were they more holy? Were they more sincere? Or were they so tuned in to a natural environment that these things could happen to them? See, none of us, myself included, are in a situation where an unusual but natural thing can happen to us. And consequently, we're cut off from communication. But if you had a choice of the world we live in now and the world those people lived in then, when those kind of experiences were possible for people, which would you honestly choose? And I, myself, would like to know more about the universe, more about the living things, more about where we came from, more about the history of the planet. See? And I think those old-timers knew what that was. Now, 1884, on the Cheyenne, Northern Cheyenne Reservation, in Montana, a famous medicine man named Ice or White Bull was asked to display his powers. And see, this is after the Cheyenne flight north, after they've been given a reservation. You've had missionaries and traders and Indian agents around this place for perhaps 8 or 9 years. And so this is what happens when the people ask White Bull to demonstrate his medicine man powers. He had some men dig a hole first, deep enough for him to sit in, and carry the dirt away. You can still see it piled up there. And this is from John Stanton timber, and if you could see the thing piled up, you're talking about 1960, that pile of dirt is still there. You can see it piled up. They put a teepee over it and brought 2 rocks from the hills, so big and heavy that it took a number of men to carry them. Then Ice ordered the military society members to stand around the outside while he and some others performed ceremonies inside the teepee. After that, he got down in the hole and they put rocks over it and covered it completely. Go outside now, he ordered them, and I will sing and then give you a signal for you to come back and lift the rocks off. So they did this. The men came in and removed the rocks, and Ice was gone. They all searched for him, and some dug and kicked around the hole to see that he was not hiding. When they had given up, they put the rocks back on as he had told them to. And shortly they heard the signal and took them off again, and there was Ice. So you had a medicine man using his powers, put in an absolutely unescapable situation. He disappears. Now, what I didn't bring is the corresponding story of the women in the camp who are preparing food, and ICE is walking by their teepee, and they said, well, wait a minute, you're supposed to be in the hole down there. And he said something to the effect, well, I'll go back down there when I'm ready. And he's walking around one part of the camp while everybody's watching the hole there. So that's a demonstration of those powers at a point where the Northern Cheyenne themselves are coming to grip with industrial society and certainly accepting the overtures of that society and trying to learn to live in it. So I think that's a transition thing that I would cite. There were times when you had to exercise your powers maybe one more time and then move on into that new life. Now, the reason I chose this topic to speak is I want to talk to younger people, Indian and non-Indian. The three of us who are total amateurs with computers don't really know what the heck we're doing. If I get to play that free soil solitaire, I much prefer that trying to do anything else on the computer. But if idiots like us can collect 550 items on a certain topic, just think what you who can use computers can do. You can choose very orthodox topics, or you can choose the wildest topics in the world. And you can use those computers to go to all kinds of source documents and dig up amazing things. Absolutely amazing things. Now, I don't call any of the work I'm doing significant, except insofar as I can present a little body of similar substance and toss it out to younger people and say, why don't you go and see what this is all about? Go and check on these things. If you want another topic, did the Spanish bring horses to America, or did the Indians already have them? Spanish brought war stallions, or great big, Indians are riding ponies. You know, pony is not a little horse, that's a colt. A pony is a kind of horse. So you got two kinds of horses. If you can transmute big war stallions with all the Arabian blood into the Indian cow pony, which is the basis of the quarter horse, you know, more power to you. You've proved a real blow for the evolutionists. But I wanted to pick these various topics, throw out enough of them to get people interested, and encourage people to go beyond the research capabilities of the requirements that you're getting in the university. I was always a mediocre student because I regarded the university library or the seminary library as the primary source of information. I just paid attention to class long enough to get a C average so that they wouldn't throw me out. But in the interim, I was in that library all the time, looking up things that I would never find in the history book, looking up things I couldn't find in the geology book. And now you have this wonderful internet in front of you. I don't happen to like Microsoft, but they do allow you to do some things. They'd put reveal codes back so I'd know what the hell I'm doing. I would be much happier. But our knowledge of the world, our knowledge of ourselves, and coming to be our knowledge of what the world used to be 20,000 or even 1,000 years ago, all that knowledge is it's inevitable that it's coming at us. We're going to have to change. We're going to have to deal with it. So why not jump in at this point and really look at some stuff. Now, this is a possible pterosaur. It's in Utah. And this will show, this is a combination of three, but there's the pterosaur. Right there is where it is, right in there. And these are people standing around looking at them. Giant human figures there. And there's some indication that in Arizona, right at the turn of the century, they're finding these gigantic birds that were carrying off livestock, etc. This gentleman is from Canada, and these things right there are the backbone of some kind of stegosaur. That's a nice little guy there. You see him right at the top? Right out of Jurassic Park. He has 4 legs, and he's wandering around. On this, you can see it rather clear. Back legs are right there, and then there's the front leg. If we could get what I call a critical mass of these photos, which I would say will be about 80 of them, we could maybe link up with the paleontologist who wasn't frightened of us and have him identify some of these. What we got right here, if you see the photo, is some kind of animal with a very big body, and there are his wings. And if you look at it here, you say, hey, wait a minute, what the heck is that? That's like putting wings on a yearling cow from the way it looks. Now, this has been gathered since mid-February by people much more skilled than I am with a computer, and I have maybe 4 or 5 additional people who promised me some brontosaurs, and in Bishop, California, they said there's 3 different kinds of dinosaurs. Now, am I asking you to believe this? No, because you don't have a critical mass. All you have are several slides that there's one figure in that might indicate a dinosaur. But what would be the effect if we had a nice task force of maybe 20 or 30 youngsters from around the country, and you all got plenty of spare time, I know that because I see you around the bars in every college town. And suppose you got together and you made a determined search of all the possible petroglyphs and pictographs that might be in museums or libraries or books. What if you pooled them all together? Then there's a chance we could make more of a statement about what they are than I have tonight. So I don't want any evolutionists go running down the road saying, he's asking me to believe in dinosaurs. I'm not asking anybody to believe in anything. What I'm trying to demonstrate is there are exciting things out there that you might enjoy knowing about, you might enjoy gathering, you might enjoy being an expert. And when you stop and think, University of Montana at Bozeman and a university in China have both said they have recovered DNA and hemoglobin from inside what should have been petrified dinosaur bones. So what you see is conceivable convergence going on here. And you've got your whole lives ahead of you to get into it and really do something. And so that's what I throw out to you tonight as a challenge. You could gather 200 of them and be wrong, but you'd have that 200 and you would have accomplished something in and of it itself, for yourselves and for others. And things that are usually wrong in one generation turn out to be the best things in the next generation, right? So you can be early, but don't sit around and don't be late. So that concludes my presentation. I think that if some of you can go back with the idea that things might have been different for the earth, for the animals, or for the people, and that we're entirely in a different kind of existence, and that there's more to living in this world than we've previously contemplated. You can accept that proposition and be able to weigh impartially things from the past that don't make sense, or things in the present that don't make sense. I'll feel I've done my job for you. So thank you very much for inviting me.